hole in the middle just to be able to go ahead and cause a pivot action, okay? So that you don't have a lot of rattling or anything like that going on. It's meant to keep a item in place. So that,
But I think we need to key here in on the fact that it's a Volkswagen. So my best guess is
Why talk about that? I've never had luck with Volkswagens.
Oh, don't get me started on Volkswagens.
Right.
I don't want to be opinionated, but when you're talking bushings on a Volkswagen, the first thing that comes to my mind is suspension. I don't know. What do you think, Jesse?
99% of the time when somebody says bushing, that's exactly where I go. Suspension.
Yeah.
That's about where you're going to see them.
Okay, what if this person kept driving the car and didn't do anything about it? Could he just keep driving it? Is it going to be that big of a problem if the bushing?
Yeah, no, he could hurt himself or somebody else.
Yeah.
It could be tragic.
Why?
It holds. I mean, it's holding your wheels together.
Basically, your entire vehicle, if you're talking about suspension, the entire top portion of the vehicle, minus the wheels and the control arms, which connect it to that vehicle, is riding on it. So as you're coming to a stop, you're going to feel that, your front right tire, front left tire, rear right, rear left, whichever tire it is that's affected, you're going to feel it immediately go ahead and try to get out of its own way, and it's going to pull that car in that direction. And that's where it could be dangerous. I mean, if he's on the highway doing 75 miles an hour with the with the rest of us that are on the highway with him, and the guy in front of him slams on his brakes, he goes to slam, that car's going to immediately pull in that direction. And he's not going to have he's going to have very little reaction time to where if he's a good driver, he'll avoid an accident. If he's an unexperienced or she's an inexperienced driver, he or she, doesn't matter, and it's going to end up being really ugly. That's when you get those multiple car, crashes and whatnot.
And I've had many. I mean, Jesse, you've had to have had many where they come into the shop, you punch the brakes, and it goes off. I mean, it literally goes to the next lane. No, bushings are really important.
Yeah, you hear
your
that.
life depends.
You hear that loud bang, and as a mechanic, as a trained professional, as soon as you hear that loud bang and you feel that car start shifting, you already know what's happening. You got a bushing that went out.
Well, I got a follow-up from Tom who said he did get the bushings fixed. Cost him several $100s, almost $1,000, and within weeks, the same thing came up again. And again, this was on a VWCC.
I would wonder who and where he got it repaired.
Correct. Yeah, that's my only thing is I would wonder who and where and what it was exactly that they replaced and whether or not they replaced the correct components.
I'm going to bring up my own personal experience. A long time ago, I had a Toyota Celica. I don't even know if they still make them or not, but I'd be at a stoplight. Every time I took off, a cloud of black smoke would come out of the back of it. And, I tried to do my own thing. I went online. I found a book. I fooled around with the spark plugs, everything I could. I was filling that thing with oil, like daily. But my brother, who's kind of a armchair mechanic, said, "Oh, it's a gasket." And I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "It's this little thin piece of something or other." But give me your ideas on it. And does it cost a lot to replace a little thin piece of something that's in your engine?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It depends on the little thin piece of gasket where it is, how hard it is to access. But what I'm keying in on here, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, Jesse, I'm keying in on that your smoke was black. Now, that's a telltale sign of actually, and I'm going to use the mechanical term here, running rich. What running rich means is excess gas. I'm going to key in on that black smoke. Now, if we had an oil problem, usually a gasket's going to create an oil problem, not a fuel problem. You're going to have a bluish to a white smoke.
Correct.
Oh, I'm keying in on the black smoke being rich, and you were running rich. I would be keying in on your fuel injectors leaking or possibly a component. Again, we would have a check engine light if a component had gone bad, but mostly, black smoke, I'm looking at a mechanical aspect.
Yep. No, and I have to agree. It's not uncommon for my customers to come in and they really don't identify what color the smoke is or really understand what color the smoke is. They just see smoke and immediately they interpret it as black smoke. What I'm keying in on is the fact that you're telling me that you have to put oil in it almost daily. So if you have a major oil leak underneath the vehicle, well, that explains that. But if you're not leaking oil and you've got smoke coming out that rear end, what more than likely is happening is you're burning oil at that point. And at that point, you could be looking at piston rings or anything like that, which you might identify that smoke as a big black cloud of smoke, when in reality, it could be that bluish gray.
Yeah.
If it's black, it's fuel. If it's bluish gray, it's oil. And if it's white, it's coolant. If you get that steam, like that big white steam. Yeah.
Now, there is a little leeway in there. Now, if and again, keying in on the fact that he said, oh, I'm having to put a quart in a day.
Correct.
Now, if you're dripping enough oil onto the exhaust manifold,
There's always
you're
that. Yeah.
literally about to catch on fire, and you would be having black smoke.
Correct.
you're
And
about
that-
to
yeah.
you're about to need a fire extinguisher quickly.
And there is always that. When you go to take off, it may not necessarily be coming out the tail end of your exhaust. It could be coming out from underneath your vehicle, and now you see that big black cloud of smoke, and you're thinking it's coming out the back, when in reality, it could be right underneath you.
It's funny. I've had so many beaters in my life that I've had all those different colored smokes come out of it.
Purple, pink, colors that don't even end shouldn't even come out.
I'm pretty sure we all have. That's why some of us ended up becoming mechanics. So
Absolutely.
Is there anything more valuable in our lifetimes than being either a computer repair person or a mechanic? Years ago, I used to see television commercials for gasoline companies where they'd say, this is the no-knock fuel. And like when your car is idling, sometimes you'll hear that tick, tick, a knocking sound.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a bad sign of something?
Yeah.
So it's not just the gasoline that you're putting in your car.
No.
It's everything. It's the maintenance, and that's why I mentioned it earlier. I mean, engine flushes are key. You got to do them at every certain intervals. Fuel injection services at every certain intervals. Transmission flushes are always good, but it all depends at what mileage you're doing. And if you didn't do it, and now you're at 150,000 miles and you bring it to me and you say, I want a transmission flush, I'm going to say, don't do it. You're going to ruin that transmission.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always say on transmission flushes, it's going to do one of two things. It will never stay the same. It'll either get better or it's going to get worse.
Correct.
I've had them come in where they, like he says, he won't do it. And I've had them come in where they've, they haven't maintained it at all. And I do a transmission flush. And now you don't have a transmission. It completely ruins it.
Yeah.
But let's go back to gasolines.
Yeah.
And gasolines, today's gasoline, think about 20 years ago. Today's gasoline is absolute garbage. What we're paying for and the expense of gasoline nowadays and what you're getting for your money, it's just garbage. It's watered down with basically whiskey. I mean, it literally is watered down with whiskey. It's a grain alcohol up to 15, sometimes 20%.
Yeah.
And it's not good on older cars, which is what I do a lot of.
Right.
Really, they were never designed to run on that type of a gas.
No, because I was going to say, if you go back, 50s, 60s, I mean, you had leaded fuel, and then it became unleaded. The piston rings and seals and everything else, they weren't designed to be able to go ahead and handle the unleaded. So as you're rebuilding engines now for some of these classic cars, we're having to update all that stuff to be able to handle the newer fuels. Where the newer cars, they're designed for that. But
your valve seat, the valve seats have to be hardened, to accept these new fuels. Now, and we think, oh my gosh, it was so long ago. Actually, we quit using lead in 1976.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't that long ago we stopped using lead.
No.
There's actually along many, many roads, there's traces of lead. You can actually go and you could get mineral absorption of lead, picked up right there on the side of the road. We used it up till 1976.
Yeah.
When you go to the gas pump, there are 3 grades to choose. A mechanic once told me it doesn't matter. Pick the lowest grade. The highest grade isn't going to do anything better for your car.
Nowadays, it really doesn't. They're all garbage.
And really, I've had customers that'll tell me, I always put 93 because it, makes my car run longer on, the mileage to miles per gallon. And I'm like, all right, if that's what you believe. I mean, I personally haven't seen it. I do know that there are some automotive manufacturers which will tell you have to run 93, especially in the case of any kind of turbo vehicle, any kind of vehicle that has a turbo.
High compression,
93, just because of the octane level. Now you got to keep in mind the octanes, the way that they work is, like your NHRA cars. I mean, these things are running 100 plus octane, in that case, you have to, back in the days I had a 93 Accord. I'll tell you this little race car and stuff. I remember having to go to the Rebel gas station on Rancho and Cheyenne and filling up with, I believe it was 105 is what they had.
100. They have 100 now. Yeah. It's an alcohol-based 100. But and you got to understand what octane does. It actually slows the burn down. It doesn't speed it up, so it's not more explosive. It's actually a slower explosion. And we're going to get into really in-depth, maybe too in-depth for this talk show right now. But octane itself slows the burn down. And we're looking at really just junk fuel nowadays. It's junk.
I would agree. I mean, at the end of the day, all these stuffs with, the fuels with the additives that all of these fuel companies are putting out there and promoting, if you will, advertising. I mean, sure, maybe it might help it burn a little bit cleaner, but regardless, at the end of the day, it's watered down alcohol. I mean, that's it. Yeah. Diesel is going down the same route. Recently, I was in California, was out there towing a vehicle, bringing my truck back home. We stopped at a fuel station up in Santa Ana, if I remember correctly, and they had biodiesel. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my dear Lord. I'm like, biodiesel.
Biodiesel.
Yeah, they had biodiesel at a Chevron. So I say, nope, I'm not putting that in my comments. I go right down the street, biodiesel. Right down the street, biodiesel. I look on my phone, pull up my handy dandy app, and I said, who's got regular 2%? California's going to the route of biodiesel. As I go to the manufacturer website, because I'm not too comfortable with it, they say it is acceptable. Now, when I hear acceptable in the
that
automotive
always scares
world,
me.
yeah, acceptable in the automotive world means go ahead, but as soon as you get a first chance to go ahead and put regular 2%, get back to it.
Jesse, help me here on biodiesel. I mean, I remember the days, and it wasn't so long off. You remember people were going to the McDonald's and getting the grease out of the fryers and using it literally as a fuel.
Yep.
I mean, is that what biodiesel is, basically?
From what I was able to read on the label, because for me it was a new concept. I'm like, biodiesel. I'm like, I've heard of it, but I'm like, what? I'm like, we're from Nevada, 2%, sulfur, right? We're good to go. And as I'm looking at it, it says that basically it's got 20% recyclable material, which basically gets converted into that diesel. So that oil and all that stuff.
French fry oil.
French fry oil, yeah.
So basically, French fry oil. That was the thing.
That's what it sounds like.
Our cars on French fry oil.
Yeah.
Bobby is the mechanic and owner of 5-Star Auto Repair. Jesse Moreno, mechanic and owner of Genuine Auto Services. I really want to thank them for joining us, and thanks for those who called and wrote in. This is State of Nevada. That was great, you guys.